Hi everyone, welcome to TV and Film Focus. I'm Victoria Main. I'm here again with our very first guest on this show when it was brand new, Alex Gutterman, filmmaker, writer, producer, director, bon vivant, man about town. Alex is here to talk about the completion of his second feature called The Hunter, amongst other things. So Alex, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Victoria. It's nice to be back.
Yeah. So tell us, you were one of the lucky ones who sort of got through production on your film before everything shut down.
Yeah, we were. We had a celebration in the community at Zeitgeist and Zuccone to kind of thank everyone and raise some money for Post. And that hit right before COVID. We literally lost 25% of the donation commitments from that event because of the stock market drop that occurred when COVID hit. People backed off. But our principal photography and literally 99.5% of our shooting was done before COVID. And yeah, it was really amazing because post during COVID is something you can do. But being on set, sure, as we know, is challenging. If impossible, or if not.
Very much. Well, you certainly need to take some costly protection.
We would not have been, if we had scheduled production for 2 months later, we would not have a film right now.
Yeah.
No question, because we had a lot of people were flying in, et cetera, et cetera. You get the point. It just would not have happened.
Yeah. Well, yay. And fantastic. You got it in the can.
Yep.
And now you're working on post-production with your editor, Kaylin Mars.
Yeah,
right?
with Kaylin. Kaylin is the backbone of Post. We do have other sound people involved. We have a Turkish-Dutch composer. We have a pretty established composer in New York consulting to us. And we have a variety of other people. But in terms of the anchor of our Post, it's Mars, Kaylin Mars, without question. With me supervising the editing. And we're also very consultative, so we're sending out cuts to people for comments, and I'm gleaning people's comments. The joke is that we're gonna send our cuts out to colleagues around the world and then ignore their advice and do what we want anyway.
That's
our thing.
Well, that's how it's done.
Yeah, no, but I am listening, and there's advice coalescing around certain core points, for sure, yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about where you're at in the post process. How long until you're actually going to have a product to put out there?
Okay, so right now we have 4 cuts. We have what I call an initial assembly, where we just wanted to take all of our material and lay it out in script order, so we could just see kind of almost like a freight train going by with all the different components, just one after another. And then we began to explore different orders that we could put the material, because our film, since it's not driven by what you might call a causally operative plot unfolding in time, right, the mathematical possibilities for the arrangement of the individual scenes are astronomical. So we've had a cut that was put together by Nora, who's the first AD, and I'm so sorry, I'm going to repeat that because of this. We had a cut put together by Nora, the first AD, who's a very, very close colleague. She also was the lead of In Winter and had a big role in this film. We jokingly refer to it as the chick flick version of The Hunter. And then we have a cut that I put together, and then we have the Mars cut. So the next phase is to send all those cuts out to people. We're going to have a little town hall and discuss it, and then I'm going to go meditate in a cave for a few weeks, and then we'll do something. But one other thing on the topic is, it's such an overwhelming mathematical conundrum, if you will, that I'm looking at dividing the problem into a release cut that would be 2 hours or less, and then a director's cut where I probably will be more 4-ish hours and include every piece of footage and just not assume that too many people will see it, but in order to create a full. And I might make the director's cut into segments.
Interesting. So any estimates on how long that process will take?
Yeah, originally I was being driven by a bit of an outside deadline because I have a distributor interested in a potential deal on it, and with his desiderata there were some timetables, but because the COVID economics have hit him too, and so my guess is that we'll have a release cut out by the summer and a director's cut in due course. Like that one, I don't have any sense of urgency on. The urgency that I have on a release cut relates partially to a particular business entity and the degree to which he wants to do an exclusive release of it. And also, the question of festivals and this and that. And it's all, the distribution landscape for low-budget independent films used to be a bit of a labyrinth, and now it's a labyrinth with trapdoors. It changes all the time. Companies come and go. There's new streaming services every day. Who pays their bills? Who does what? It's quite something,
You had some success with distribution of your first feature in winter.
Yeah, surprising. I actually am still at the height of it. I was getting almost $1,000 a quarter, which is, for an unknown film by an unknown team, is really, really rare. And now I'm still collecting probably $1,000 a year, and it's not really. I mean, the numbers are really cool. It's nice to all of a sudden get a check and you can fix your car, But what was particularly gratifying is that the first distributor didn't do a tremendous amount with the film, and that's partially our fault in terms of some marketing choices we made. But what's been neat is that the second person or the second entity has been able to find some audiences in Europe and Asia, and I think my work may resonate a little more. The first one was working more in North America. So it's exciting and interesting. It's neat to know that somewhere maybe some Korean person is watching my movie.
That is cool.
It's fun,
It's very cool. A strange way to bring the world together in a time when the world isn't really together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk just briefly. I want to tell people a little bit about The Hunter, and,
Sure.
then we're going to kind of talk a little bit about your next feature after that. So
Absolutely.
Tell people a little bit about what The Hunter is about.
Yeah, boy, it's interesting. I literally woke up this morning from a pretty deep dream about watching footage, editing the film. I was sitting next to John, in the dream, I was sitting next to John Cromwell, who plays the philosopher. He's the core of the film. And what I'll say, I don't mean to obfuscate or be mysterious, but The Hunter continues to reveal itself to me and continues to be a mystery to me. I often say, well, when Van Gogh was painting Starry Night, he didn't have necessarily, he might have had some ideas, but there's evolution in artwork. And this particular piece, the piece is really about meaning, and it's centered around the ecclesiastical narrative from the Old Testament, where the narrator talks about his experience finding that the pursuit of pleasure and the pursuit of wisdom are both empty. So that what happens in the film is that there's these threads. If you consider almost a DNA double helix, so you've got one thread which is two people pursuing pleasure, and they end up empty-handed. And then a second thread winding in parallel, opposite, if you will, on the ladder, is the pursuit of wisdom, which is the philosopher having these esoteric, absurd conversations with people, again, empty, which conclude with a third dialogue in which there's a nervousness about severe mental illness as a result of too much inquiry. So there's emptiness there. And then what you might call the central spine of that stairway is a theater company that's putting on a performance piece about the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, they're all in an underground labyrinth, and framing this labyrinth are two filmmakers, an editor played by Chris Kelly out of LA, and a film director played by Nora O'Brien from the cities. So the film is a day in the life of two filmmakers who themselves are facing fundamental existential questions, who are making a film about a group of people trapped in an underground labyrinth, making a play about fundamental existential questions. And when people ask, what's it about? I say, exactly. Because what it's about is what's it about. The film itself is a meditation on being about things and about meaning.
Yeah.
And the only other thing I'll say, unless you have more questions, is that most filmmakers want to achieve something in terms of audience experience with a film. And one mark that you feel like maybe you succeeded is if people seem to be having something like that experience. So, for example, within Winter, I was looking to give an experience of loneliness and isolation, literally, not just watch something, but feel it. And for this one, the tagline on that is an expansive experience in a restricted space. The idea that to constrain and confine the mind to a point where it must expand, or being lost in a labyrinth, realizing you'll never get out, sitting down, surrendering, and all of a sudden being free. So the film is intended to be a meditation or a spiritual or almost a Zen experience. Does it succeed? Some people have had that. Others have turned it off after 15 minutes, people in our community. So it's, as we know, it's an individual thing.
Very much. Well, art is subjective. Mm-hmm. We know that.
Much of it, yeah. We don't have time for the philosophy of aesthetics right now.
You're right.
Yeah.
That'll be another show.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so, so this is a very philosophical sort of approach to filmmaking. It's very image driven. I watched your film. It's a very, it's extremely visual.
Which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about The Hunter.
Oh, you
now.
saw one of the cuts, right?
Yep.
You've seen one, yeah.
Yep,
So,
one of
yeah.
the rough cuts. And
Yeah, the visuals I'm really excited about.
yeah, and it's very unique visually, and I really liked watching it. It was a very fun experiment in time. And
That's well said.
so, but your films tend to express sort of deeper feelings and stuff like that. So, and characters that are experiencing almost, as you say, an existential crisis in some ways. So tell us a little bit about your next feature.
Right.
What is it, Threshold?
The Threshold, yeah, just Threshold. You're absolutely right. For better or for worse, I do this work in order to wrestle with things that are pretty deep for me and potentially maybe for others. So for In Winter was say, loss, love and loss, and then The Hunter would be maybe a midlife crisis around meaning. So Threshold is fundamentally addresses the human encounter with evil. So the core of Threshold it's a New York film, or Philly, but probably New York. You have a small group of people centered around a scholar of Russian literature who's writing a book on Dostoevsky, and as we know, Dostoevsky himself wrestled profoundly with the question of the human response to human and evil in many of his novels. And so what the film opens with a pan across one of those New York bookshelves and then down to a desk. It's empty. A woman comes in, the partner of this person, and she finds this folder on his desk. And you're familiar with many of the classic folders from, say, classic photographs, say, from Vietnam or from World War II, where you might see an SS person shooting a Jewish woman with her child, or the famous photo from Vietnam with the two kids who've been napalmed running down the street. These classic, iconic, there's one from World War II of Russian women searching a battlefield for their dead sons under a gray sky. And so this woman is looking through these photos, just similar to Von Trier will often open a film with photos or images. And what has become clear is whoever's working at that desk has been collecting these for some reason. Well, this man is having he's having a breakdown, encountering what human beings do to one another. And in the film, the entire second act, he's in a psychiatric ward wrestling with suicide while his friends hold a birthday party for him anyway. And there's a group of New Yorkers, including a Franciscan renunciate, a bisexual poet who has a son and may have just aborted a child. So the issue of a secular Mother Mary, the issue of losing a son or losing a child, the issue of sin, the issue, and so that the film is again a journey for me to encounter, and I will say probably the most difficult aspects of my own inner world I'm trying to address with this one.
Well, okay. So there's a lot there to unpack.
Another Miramax,
Alex just handed me a steamer trunk full of things to discuss.
Sure.
So I'm going to try to pick one.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
It sounds like a fascinating idea. Now, you're planning to shoot this in New York?
Yes.
Or Philly, what, like maybe next year?
No, I would say 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
2 to 3 years would be my gut on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is this a script, you and I, the first time we talked, one of the big reasons I had you in was because I was kind of fascinated by your approach to creating a script. So tell us about, how that process is going on this third.
I'm glad you asked that. A couple of days ago, I got off of a Zoom call with Francis Hyde, who you know, Francis Hyde Jr., who's a executive producer and close friend of mine, with several actors around the country who are intrigued by working with me and are excited about this project. And they include a variety of people you see in The Hunter who are becoming very close colleagues, as well as Nora, who's been a colleague since In Winter. And what we are doing is we are currently reading Dostoevsky's Demons, the novel, together, and then, we're reading it, chunks of it, and discussing. But we're also discussing filmmaking. We're discussing The Hunter. FYI, the reason we're focusing on Russian literature, because as we know, the Russian sensibility is much more deep and dark than the American sensibility, and the Russian sensibility. So this film is Russophilic. This film is essentially Russophilic. in the birthday party scene, there are going to be discussions about Tolstoy, Turgenev, Chekhov, Gogol. The whole film is going to be rife and full of Russian literature and history references. And so what the team is doing is that we are diving into Russian culture and history and literature and sharing references and discussing. We're going to Tarkovsky and this and that and the other thing. And where the script is that currently I have a notebook and I should have brought it in. The script is currently not in screenplay form at all. I'll write a note about a person, I'll write a note about an anecdote, I'll write a note or I'll feel a scene. An example would be in the psychiatric ward, there are certain characters, and there's a Muslim gentleman in the psychiatric ward named Christian, and he believes himself to be the imam of the ward, and he will put a white sheet around himself and he goes up and down the halls doing the call to prayer 5 times a day until the staff try and stop him. This is an experience that I actually had myself in a medical facility, not me. I observed this. And so when I see, for example, a particular scene, I'll jot down notes on the scene. And then from these conversations and this notebook, I'll begin to construct a screenplay.
Interesting.
And in consultation with people.
Right.
Yeah.
So you guys doing a lot of Zoom meetings right now?
Yeah, we're not. People are so busy, and people are volunteering for this. I'm not paying. So we're doing it about between every 3 and 5 weeks. It would be completely ridiculous for me to ask people to do more for nothing. At the same time, I will also periodically have, say, an hour-long phone call with Jessica Graham in L.A. Jessica is going to be playing the therapist who's the partner of this scholar, and their partnership or marriage is falling apart, but of course they love each other, and she's deeply concerned about his wellness, but she's also beginning a potential lesbian affair with the poet, and there's all sorts of stuff going on. But Jessica is very deeply engaged, and so she's a co-creator. So we'll discuss, on these individual calls with different actors, we'll discuss characters, and we'll talk about, learn more and discuss and explore, and we'll get that little resonance when we feel something's right. Or I'll talk to Kaylin Mars, who's likely to DP or guide the production technically, and we'll begin to talk about technical aspects. And so this is a very organic, slow-moving, forward-moving thing. It's not get everybody together for 2 months, do it, and leave. We're growing together.
Yeah. It's I like that approach.
I love it, but it's just how I work. You know?
It's really nice to. It's really interesting having sort of a developing story that comes out of the people who are going to be involved in making the story.
The film is developing. A group of people are creating and developing the film.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's very neat.
Yeah.
And okay, so you've got a lot going on. You've got that going on. You've
Yes.
got obviously still working on distribution and stuff for The Hunter.
Yep.
And all those
Yeah.
sort of post-production things with The Hunter. And then in addition to all of that, now apparently you're doing some producing for outside entities.
Yes, that's right. People keep an eye on things, and you get connections on sets, and then people ask you to help. And so slowly, I've started taking on what you might call more formal producer roles, like you'd get an IMDb credit and maybe a % on the back end. So for example, locally, I've been doing some consulting and some support of some projects that I would need to ask their permission to discuss, but also people that you may know Chance and Hunter Fortune, who are doing Lifties. Chance is a military guy and a creative and a writer and really quite brilliant. And they have this this comedy series about the kind of underbelly of the ski and snowboard industry, lift operators and their lifestyle. And it's actually quite charming and well done, and so I'm helping them move that forward. Also working with some people in the cities, and then two of the more substantial projects I'm involved in. Dale Botten, who's a local writer, has a script about the lynchings based on Michael Fido's book, The Lynchings in Duluth. And for many, many years, no one, even though he won a $20,000 prize in LA, nobody would touch that script because nobody thought anything could be made of a lynching film in our country. But now, with politics and cultural views becoming more open to certain types of content, we have now managed to move that to a very significant forward point in LA with an LA producer, pitch deck, a variety of things happening. So that particular project, of which I'm a minority owner in the screenplay and a 25% stakeholder in the production itself, is moving forward in California, which we're talking about $10 to $20 million budgets and significant players. Now, I'm not saying it's at that point, but we have a legitimate producer who wants to bring it there. And that's very, very interesting. And then another project I'm involved in is working with two African-American filmmakers and producers on the East Coast in New Jersey and Baltimore, have a very, very interesting episodic called Opus Travel Arts. And the essence of that is that Maurice Portier, who's the artistic principal of that team, is a poet, filmmaker, and painter and writer himself. And if you imagine Anthony Bourdain, but so Anthony Bourdain traveled to encounter food, but also the world of the food and the people of the food. Maurice is traveling the world to encounter people of color artists of all kinds, all around the world. And so it's a really awesome project, and some of their initial episodes, and they've just gotten into a couple festivals. So I feel that I'm also working, because I have experience with distribution, experience on production, and I know them through a connection here, who's a guy who's helping us with sound. That's another project that I'm helping out with, and it's really, really wonderful. So I don't know, it's been neat to do that. There are others, but those are just some ones that come to mind.
Yeah, well, and that makes for sort of a rich artistic life to be able to, work on your own vision and your own stories, but also help other people tell different stories.
Yeah. Yes.
And now you're here still in Duluth.
Yeah.
But eventually you're going to end up back in New York. Is that right?
It's yes and no. The short story is I'm not doing some sort of radical disappearing move. It's more like center of gravity. My center of gravity has been in this area for many years because my children have been here, but now they're 17 and 19 and they're leaving. So what's going to happen is it's as though I was a little planet circling this sun called Duluth, or some sort of molecular arrangement, and now the gravitational pull of other parts of the world is becoming larger. So you'll see me circling maybe Europe more, New York, but back here, sailing, being with people, connecting. I have many friends here. So it's more like a shift rather than a radical move. One variable on that is I have an application in for European citizenship, and we'll see where that goes. It's a complicated thing.
I can imagine.
Yeah, there's a historical, I have some Sephardic Jewish in my background, and Portugal and Spain are doing reparations for torturing and expelling Sephardic Jews in the Inquisition. So they've invited documented Sephardic Jews to return to Portugal and Spain. So I had a genealogical study done. It's because our Sephardic family assimilated to Episcopalianism, but it's about your genetics, I guess. So according to the genealogist and the law firm in Israel, I have a good chance of Portuguese citizenship. However, it's in the interest of the law firm to say that, because then I spend the money to try and do it.
Absolutely.
But the genealogist seemed independent, and it was fascinating. So that's happening. We'll see. I might have a little cottage in Portugal sometime that I hope to share with all my artist friends.
Interesting.
Yeah. After World War III, we can all die of radiation poisoning, like on the beach.
Well, at least we'll be on the beach. Well,
Sorry.
Now, despite COVID, obviously you're finding that people are producing work, people are doing work, people are creating work.
Yeah. In a way, these lower budget projects without big epic, budgets, and without trying to get hundreds of people together in a set are probably a little easier to pull off. There are all these guidelines in Hollywood for real big movies,
Right.
I'm sure that a big movie probably has 20% higher budget now because of COVID safeguards through the union.
Oh, absolutely.
Like literally all the stuff. They have to have a COVID specialist on staff. They have to do all these things. But yeah, people are starting to do things. And people are I was just involved. Do you know Nick Hansen?
I do. I worked with Nick.
I play the role of Polonius in his Hamlet 2020, so I'm acting also. And he's been very COVID safe with the production. He's doing a lot of Zoom stuff, a lot of socially distanced stuff. People are adapting.
Well, and that, I had faith from the beginning that the creative community would be one of the first to adapt because of, the very nature of our business. And, maybe a mindset that's a little more open and a little more creative and adaptable inherently. I figured we'd bounce back better than the banking industry. You know what I mean?
Well, it's like people have to do this to remain. People who are seriously creative at whatever level. An example would be my colleague here in town, Lance Karasti, who, is basically doing a project called Hell on his own. Like he's shooting himself, he's acting. Lance and I we do very different type of work, but we're very similar because we're wrestling with with our own stuff and our own questions when we create. So Lance is another kind of guy who has to do it, so he's doing it.
Yep.
You kind of get to see who's really committed.
Yeah.
And who it's not even committed. Who really has to do it are the people that are still somehow doing it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have stopped.
You know, and it's interesting. My own experience recently with sort of finishing, you know, finally getting something down on a project that, you know, I mentally started in 2018.
Yes.
And actually started thinking about then, and now, and then all of a sudden I had time to, you know, to actually do it.
Yes.
And it sort of slowed things down at a time when, you know, and that enabled the space to do it.
It's a very good time for writing and
Yep.
for developing. It's a good time for editing. Not a great time for shooting.
Right. But, you know, people are finding creative ways to, you know, and I think the film festival circuit's going to be really interesting in 2021 because, you know, for the most part, it's going to be productions that were done under very different conditions.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be one of the more interesting seasons we have.
That's a good point. And then the question of the degree to which theaters and theatrical film festivals are going to come back.
Yep.
One of the things I heard is that one of the big festivals, it might have been I can't remember, Sundance or some big festival, Toronto. What they're doing is, my understanding is they're doing it in major cities. So that you don't have to fly to Sundance. Instead, there'll be Sundance, New York, Sundance, LA, Sundance, and it'll be the same content or very similar, but they're going to create that festival around the world for people, but in physical spaces. But you won't have to fly to get somewhere. Instead, you just, you know, grab a taxi, go down to some theater in New York and sit 5 feet away. I don't know. That's what I heard.
Interesting.
That they're doing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is interesting.
Well, that's a very workable and in some ways more egalitarian approach
Right.
to hotsy-totsy festivals,
Yeah, it's
which
true.
some of them are.
Yeah.
Extremely hotsy-totsy. So that's a technical word for
Yes.
those of you at home who don't know what hotsy-totsy is. But anyway, it's going to be a very interesting 2021.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you stopped by to chat
Thanks.
today.
Yeah, it's nice to talk.
As always, we cover a lot of territory.
Yes.
We have a wide-ranging discussion when Alex is here, which
you.
I love. So thanks for being here, Alex.
Thank you.
And folks, we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much, everyone.